welcome to Fright Fix.
Woohoo.
Hey Celia.
Hey, back again.
Back in the
The horror
what?
seat.
Back in the horror seat. That's it. That's
It's
it.
like a hot seat, but a horror seat.
Yeah, so this episode we are reviewing a movie, a very recent movie actually, called Late Night with the Devil. And it's directed by, I think, brothers, Colin and Cameron Cairnes.
Mhm.
I'm guessing they're brothers, unless they're like husband and husband or something. I
Yeah,
don't know.
maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. The only reason I actually forgot what movie we were gonna review, because I think we decided very quickly on what we wanted to review, and
Yeah.
the only reason I remembered that we were doing Late Night with the Devil was because I said to you, this movie stars David Dalmatian, even though that's not his name. It's like David Dastmalchian or something.
Dastmalchian, maybe?
Dastmalchian, yeah. But in my
It is
head,
definitely Dalmatian. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I kept thinking. Oh, Dalmatian. Yeah, it's that Dalmatian movie.
It's
Yeah.
the Dalmatian. And I bet if you typed in David Dalmatian, he is exactly who would come up because a
Yeah.
lot of people would misspell it for
I
that.
bet.
I've never seen him in anything else. Have you?
Yeah, I've seen him in loads of things. I think
What?
yeah, because he's just one of them guys that pops up in loads of movies, but I just never knew his name. I think he's in the recent Suicide Squad movie. He plays like the polka dot man.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure he's in one of the Batman movies. Might be Dark Knight Returns,
Oh, wow.
Dark Knight or something. He's got that face. I've seen him in lots of stuff. Yeah, The Dark Knight. Oh, that was actually his first movie. There we go. No,
wow,
yeah, that was
and
his
he's in
first movie.
Oppenheimer. Have you seen Oppenheimer?
Oh yeah, I've seen Oppenheimer.
I haven't, but
Oh,
I guess
that's a good one. He's just one of these guys that just appears in like everything, but
Mm.
he's like got that weird face that you recognize, but you can't quite put your finger on. But to be honest with you, I'm actually quite glad to see him like lead a movie, like
Yeah.
a fairly yeah. So yeah, it's good to see him. And yeah, anyway, I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna ask you because I normally go first, and I'm gonna ask
Ooh.
you this time. What did you think of Late Night with the Devil?
Well, first off, we both before we started the episode said that we couldn't remember what film we were doing this week. So before we were trying to find it, we knew it had the word devil in it. I couldn't remember what the film was, and then I remembered that I was excited to do this film because it was a talk show. So I was like, Late Night, that makes sense, and then managed to find it. I was really excited for this film because I love that kind of when's it set, like it's 1977, isn't it? So
yes,
1970s late night retro looking. I know it's embarrassing if you were watching that at the time, but retro TV shows. And I didn't realize until I started watching it that it was basically just the broadcast of that full episode. And it says at the beginning, this is a broadcast of the last broadcast of Late Night with the Devil, the Halloween special. And it really brought me back to my creepypasta days, where you'd have a creepypasta and it was like found footage from the final ever episode of SpongeBob, or like the final episode of this talk show. And so I was like, ooh, gearing up for one of my kind of favorites. And I liked that it's very stylistic. As soon as you start watching it, it starts with this kind of montage of the story of the main character, who is Jack's name, Jack Delroy. He's David Dalmatian, who is the talk show host. And the whole idea is that he is kind of not doing very well. His ratings aren't doing very well with Night Owls, which is a great name for a late night talk show. So there's suggestions that he has sold his soul, or he has done something that means that he's desperate basically to win fame. And then it tells you that this film is essentially just the last broadcast of Night Owls, and that everything goes wrong, and you'll see basically. So I feel like this film starts off really strong. For me, I was very interested, and I think I was just, because it's filmed in, what's the ratio of, like, square?
It's like
square.
Like a 4:3 type, like an old school TV ratio, yeah.
And the colours are very old school, highly like saturated. And so I enjoyed the stylistic elements to the film. We'll talk a little bit about like what happens at the end, I think, as we go on. But I do feel like this is one of those films that I was really excited about, and then it didn't, if I'm just being honest, didn't hold build up to that feeling by the end. I felt
Right.
like, and it happens all the time, and we say this basically every time, that you just get these horror films where they come up with a really, really good idea and then they have to play it out, and what they end up doing in the climax, for me, usually falls short of what my imagination has thought of. But there were, I would say, 3/4 of this film I was hooked. It was
Yeah.
just the ending that I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I was thinking creepypasta, which was going to be more gory. I thought I was going to be a bit effed up by this film. I thought it was going to be
Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
those, you know, and it wasn't. So I'll leave it there for now. I'd love to know what you think.
Yeah, it's. I think we've been recording this podcast together for far too long because we seem to have the same opinion on bloody everything. I'm pretty sure our pheromones or hormones have gone into sync with each
We've
other or
synced our
something.
cycles, our horror cycles. Oh my God, bestie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's happened. Yeah, because I felt the same way where I was mega excited for this movie, and as you said, 3/4 of the way through, to be honest, right up until the end or just before the end, just before the climax, I was invested. I was like,
Yeah.
normally when I watch these movies, very rarely do I just sit down and just watch it with my full attention kind of thing. Normally I've got like either I'm working at the same time or I've
Mhm.
but this is, and I think it's a sign of a movie when it just takes my full attention.
Yeah.
Like this is one of those rare movies that we review on this channel where the movie just grabbed my attention. I stopped doing what I was doing for the
Yeah,
bulk
right
of
from the
it.
beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's just a sign of a gripping movie. Like, and yeah, so I think you described the plot pretty well. So like David Dalmatian, he's like the host of a Johnny Carson type late night talk show. So the equivalent today is like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon,
All the
that kind of stuff.
Jimmies. Yeah.
All the Jimmys, yeah. And I thought they got the tropes, the late night talk show tropes pretty nailed, even though it's more from that kind of Johnny Carson kind of era, like having the opening,
Mhm.
the terrible jokes,
Yeah.
the studio band. There's even the sidekick on the side, like how
Yeah.
I don't know who are the sidekicks of modern talk shows. Like I think Jimmy Kimmel has Guillermo. Sorry, I can't say his name properly.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I haven't seen any of them, but I do know
So a
what you
lot,
mean.
yeah. So a lot of these, yeah, like Stephen Colbert has, I forgot his name, the guy who plays the piano or whatever. But yeah, and just like yeah, I thought they nailed the TV show tropes, the late night TV
Mhm.
show tropes, and even having like the guests on, and yeah, I thought I was just hooked in, and I really wanted this to be a good movie, and I was just so excited about it. And
Mm.
I mean, to be honest, even before we got to the movie, oh my gosh, when I watched the opening 2 minutes of this movie twice, like I watched it
Mm.
once and then went back and just watched it again, and that was before we even got into the movie. It was just
Yeah.
the opening studio logos.
Yes, there were
Oh
so
my
many
gosh.
of them.
I counted 9 and I wrote their names down.
That's
So
crazy.
there was IFC Films, Shudder, Image Nation Abu Dhabi, Vic Screen, Good Fiend Films, Cinetech, AGC Studios, Future Pictures, Spooky Pictures. Oh my gosh, I've never
It
seen a movie with 9 studio logos.
And it
Just
just
like,
kept going. Do you know the really famous Family Guy sketch where he goes to the
yes,
cinema and like he
yes,
keeps thinking it's the film? That's what happened in this.
that's
There's one
exactly,
of
yeah.
them that was like a really cool stop motion animation of a kid in a house. I was like, oh, is this
Good
part of
Fiend
it?
Films.
Yeah, I was like, I like this. And then it goes on to something else. So you think, am I just going to get roped into just watching loads of title films? And then I also thought, how does it work as an organization to have so many production companies like vying for, I don't know how it works, but oh my God, I noticed that as well.
Yeah, so I think that because this movie must have, I'm guessing it was a low budget movie, so they probably just borrowed a little bit of money from a lot of companies,
Yeah.
and part of the contract is probably stick our studio
Yeah.
logo at the beginning of the movie. Yeah. I really liked the visuals of this film, and I think you
Yeah.
touched upon it with the aspect ratio, that kind of 4:3 aspect ratio, where how TVs back in the day were just those kind of. It's weird because like oldies will remember those old TVs, like whereas youngsters, I bet when they're watching this movie will think, why is this film shot like an Instagram video?
Oh
Like
yeah, that's so
like a
depressing.
like a square Instagram kind of post or
That
whatever.
is
But
true.
yeah, and yeah, I liked how, I mean, clearly the movie was shot digitally. Like I was really hoping that they just would use like the old tech to shoot shoot it, but I felt like they kind of got the visual characteristics of those old
I
video
think they did pretty
cameras.
well. I think it was one of those films that it kind of needed to be digital for some, it needed to have a bit more flexibility maybe than film could provide. But obviously it would have been nicer because the whole premise of this film is that you're watching a full episode and it starts by doing almost like an advert for the show, and it gives you like a quick background into that it's not doing very well and he wants it to do better, blah blah blah. And then it does a countdown, doesn't it? Like you're starting a TV show.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of the episode, it is the full late night talk show episode.
Yeah.
The only difference is that when they go to break, you don't see commercials, you don't see adverts, you see like the reality backstage, which was one of the things I really liked, and I'm sure you picked up on it as well, was that they inverted the black and white. The idea that everything on camera is black and white and everything in reality is full of colour, because they did colour for when it was on air and black and white when it was real life. And it was a cool reversed reality thing, which I thought was cool.
The actual concept I liked. I just wish they went a little bit further with it. And oh dear, this is like one of the disappointments for me with the film. I just felt like whoever was taking care of the visuals was like halfway there. They were halfway where they needed to be, but they kind of I don't know, just stopped short. So I don't know, maybe they just didn't have enough time. But I felt like there could have been a little bit more care in making so with the actual talk show, making it look more like an old-timey video quality. Like it was just a bit too clean for my liking. Like I'm pretty sure they could have taken it a bit more. And what I would have liked is if the behind the scenes stuff, when they're not shooting the show, you know how it's black and white, I kind of wish it was a bit more grainier, or a bit more felt like it was shot on film, like an 8mm film, so it just feels like it's a behind the scenes documentary of the show, just so there's a bit more. And the thing is, you can buy filters that do that. Like it's not even. I kind of wish they did it. And also with the sound was a bit kind of. I felt like with the TV show they could have. It needed to be more mono. Like it was too clean. It was too.
Yeah.
It's like they were almost there because
the idea's there. Yeah.
Yeah, because they had some moments where the sound was being distorted. Like there was this weird kind of reverb isn't the right word, but this kind of flanging of the sound, and there was like this kind of hiss in the background. Like they had the ideas. But it was just, I don't know, I just felt like it could have been pushed a bit more. And so I mean, so at a technical level with those things, I was a bit, I don't know, a bit dissatisfied with, but it was fine. It was still fine. I mean, there's this kind of weird deconvergence that they have with the image, where they kind of, so like with those old, I suppose even modern screens, like it's the red, green, and blue colors that kind of build the image. And sometimes on old TVs, like so the gun or whatever that fires out those colors or fires out the light, sometimes they can become misaligned a little bit, and it creates this weird kind of halo around the image. And you could see they were trying to recreate that here. And I mean, there were moments where I paused and like pushed my eyes right up against the screen to see if I was definitely seeing that, and you could see they were trying to go for that. So stuff like that.
It's almost like they've relied on the idea too much and not the execution. They've probably been like, this is a great idea, we'll do it like an old-fashioned TV show, which they did. But like you say, actually taking a step back and say, okay, but how can we do that in a really clever way, not just rely on the fact that it's a cool concept that nobody's done before, which I think they probably did rely on.
Yeah. And they stuck to the as we were watching the movie, I kept waiting for them to sorry, let me reverse back. So when the movie started and they were shooting the show, I was thinking, okay, they're actually this movie is being presented to us as the viewer. So we, all the characters, when they're talking to the audience, they're talking to us, the viewer, because it's the TV show. And I kept waiting for the moment where they screwed that up, but they kind of stuck with it the entire way through. They didn't really deviate from that. They had their kind of 3 camera setup or whatever, where they got the left, the right, and the main center shot. So I kind of commend them for sticking to that.
Yeah.
And so I suppose at a technical level, I kind of enjoyed all those things I've just mentioned, but could have been a bit, I don't know, could have been a bit.
They could have gone further, and I think what I did really enjoy the storyline. I think it builds up a lot of anticipation when they directly tell us that something bad's going to happen. You don't get that very often when a movie just goes, something terrible's going to happen. You wait and see. And it starts off that this episode is their Halloween special, and it says introducing guests, and then it says the guests that are going to come on. So you kind of know what's what's gonna happen in a way, because you know who the next guest is going to be, but you don't know
Mm.
what they're going to do. And a really quick summary of the guests. The first guest is like a psychic, and he comes on.
Yeah.
He does that thing where at the beginning it's very obvious that he doesn't really know what he's doing, because he's like, is there a Peterson in the crowd, or does anyone know? And it's like, my girlfriend's dad is called Peterman, Mr. Peterman. And he's like, yes, Peterman. You know, that kind of, everybody knows that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
he does this kind of really terrible cold reading of the audience.
Yeah.
Like all those, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm really not a believer in people that do that stuff.
Yeah.
And like he's like, there's a Peterson, a
Yeah.
Peterman.
Yeah.
And then after, some audience member essentially makes fun of him for it. Like,
Yeah.
but then after he's like, an Elizabeth, a Betty, or whatever. And then but then after that, he does find
he does a real one. I won't go into like the whole story, but he essentially does talk about a mother and a daughter, and the daughter's the brother, so her son, her brother had
Eddie.
died, and so there was, and then you're like, oh, that's cool, he's actually done it. And then he has this crazy moment where he's like, there's a really dark force here, and he says a name. I can't remember what the name was, but
Millie or something.
Millie, and nobody says that they know a million. And there's this bit where, so this whole time it's been very, I don't know if analog's the right word, but it has very much been a retro TV thing where there's no CGI or whatever. And there's this moment when he's having this premonition or whatever it is, where his eyes roll into the back of his head.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it was so well done, because it was so subtle. I think he opens one eye and it's rolled back, and then he opens the other one and it rolls back. So it's slightly off.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that was a really good indication of what's to come, because it was very subtle. And you hear the audience gasping because they clearly saw it as well. And so he kind of gets messed up by that. And the second person to come on as part of the segment is a magician who is also a disbeliever in the paranormal, and they
He's
have
like
this
a debunker,
argument, a debunker, and he has this argument that everything is trick of sleight of hand, trick of the light. And so the next segment is him talking to this medium, and they have a back and forth about it. And the medium ends up being violently ill and like spurting out this black liquid everywhere, which is very Exorcist of him. And then it goes to a commercial break, and David Dastmalchian's like, I'm really scared by that, because the name that he said, that was the entity that was there, is the nickname that he had for his wife who died a year ago, and nobody else knew that. And they kind of just leave it there a little bit, because it's in a commercial break, he's getting his makeup done and blah blah blah, and then boom, they're on to the next bit. But you find out later on that after he was ill, he ends up going to hospital and dying, and he finds this out, that David's character finds it out slowly throughout the film, that he's gone into an ambulance, he didn't make it to hospital, all this stuff. And then the second kind of guest to come on is a doctor and a girl who's clearly possessed, very Exorcist actually. And they speak to Mr. Wiggles, I think his name is, which is the demon that lives inside this child. And I think it was at that point where I was like, okay, this is where the horror is going to start, because we've had like a little bit of build up with a few things, and then this exorcism happens, and it's very Exorcist, isn't it? Like the
absolutely,
the
it's
face.
from that kind of era as well. That late 70s kind of, that's round about when I think Exorcist was like 75 or something, or I don't know. It was that kind of there's clear kind of homages there to the Exorcist.
Because when she's being when they're talking to the demon in her, she obviously, it's hard to say the actor or in the film, because I mean not in the film that we're watching, but like the actual film of the film we're watching, she's had prosthetics added, and they've definitely made it look like the Exorcist. Like the eyes are very similar color to when and she speaks in two voices, and so they do this exorcism, not an exorcism, a talking to Mr. Wilson. I feel like I was really interested because the devil or the demon was really interested in Jack Delroy, the host, and said, you know me, I've been really excited to meet you and all this stuff. And then it got my head going about where this film is going. Was this on purpose? Did they bring her on because they wanted to find something out?
Because the ghost was, or the demon was saying all the kind of cryptic kind kind of things to Delroy.
Yeah.
Like, and I was thinking, like, okay, there's clearly some link between these characters. Like,
Yeah.
we're gonna. I kept thinking they're gonna reveal something about his Delroy's past, or
Yeah.
There's some kind of that. I thought all this was all leading up to something about his relationship with his recently deceased wife that we didn't know. I thought there was
Yeah.
going to be some revelation about.
Yeah.
I don't know. There was something a bit more sinister going on in the background, and maybe the wife's come back to get some kind of revenge on him, or like
Yeah.
maybe what they presented to the world was some kind of lovey-dovey relationship, but behind the scenes something else was going on. I thought that's what
Yeah.
was going to happen, but
I agree. I thought maybe he'd killed her and like this was her revenge on him or whatever. Because it turns out, I don't know if I'm skipping too far ahead, but the whole storyline of Jack Delroy is that it's set up in a really interesting way because his wife has died of lung cancer where she'd never smoked a day in her life,
yeah.
and he seems truly heartbroken by it.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's also this storyline or these snapshots that he's part of the Grove, which is real, isn't it?
Well, Bohemian Grove is what it's based on, which is
Yeah.
like a real life thing, yeah, which is a kind of secret men's only underground kind of club
thing. Because I've seen they have that big owl kind of totem pole thing that I'm pretty sure is real, or there is some sort of totem pole as part of this camp thing. That obviously it's intimated that he could have sacrificed or sold his soul to get his TV show, because there's a bit when he's getting more famous right at the beginning, someone says, "What did you sacrifice to get here?" in the audience. It's really quick, and they're like, "Oh, what did you sacrifice?" And then that comes back at the end. They say it again. "What did you sacrifice to get here?" And it turns out, spoiler alert, that he unwittingly sacrificed his wife, I think, because he didn't know that she was going to die because of it. But he'd said that he would, by any means necessary or something, he wants to be famous. And then she, boom, gets ill. But that the episode where she comes on to his show and says, "I'm dying, I love my husband," does really well and catapults him forwards. So it's like, monkey's paw type story. But it just felt like that was the bit that I didn't really think was that good, that story. It was just a bit, I feel like they left it too late. It was about 2 minutes before the film ended, and suddenly you see all of this stuff. And you ever watching a film and you have to double check how far through you are, because you're like, surely there's not enough time left to figure it all out. And I looked and there was genuinely 5 minutes left, and they just quickly explained all of this. So I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. There's absolutely I feel the same way as you. It just felt like my first thought as soon as this film ended was, okay, I'm gonna have to go online and I'm gonna find somebody who's gonna explain this to me, like and it's all gonna make sense. Like someone's gonna explain something I missed. But that didn't seem. Sorry, let's turn this on silent. But that didn't even seem to be the case. Like, it was just like pretty much what you saw on screen is what you get. And so there's this one bit I found online, and I don't know if it's even hinted at the movie because it must have just gone over my head or something. But right, so just this is a couple of sentences, so I'll just go through it. So traditional folklore states that if a person makes a contract with the devil for earthly goods, the devil comes to claim his payment in 7 years. The documentary footage at the start of the film shows Delroy at the Grove in 1969, and his wife dies in 1976, 7 years later.
That does make sense.
Yeah, so I can see how it's kind of hinted in the
But
movie,
that's very specific. Like, I don't think unless you read that, you'd know.
I would not have known.
Like, and even somebody who was, I don't know, particularly interested in the occult, that's a very specific reference of 7 years. Unless they'd said something in it that allowed the audience to understand that and then go, oh, and actually it's 7 years since she died. It feels like a little bit of a stretch that, I mean, they probably did do it on purpose, but it feels a little bit of a buried trivia, like factoid.
Yeah. So the more as we talk about this movie and the more kind of just our experience with it, this is a movie for nerds or geeks or people that have an interest in the occult and its kind of surrounding material. Because as I was watching it, I got some of the references because I have a very limited interest in certain elements of this story, like outside of this movie. So you see that like the magician that was on the professional magician who was debunking their claims, like he's based on a real life guy called James Randi.
Oh.
And James Randi throughout, like, I don't know, the 70s, 80s and 90s and 2000, whatever, he was like, he used to, so he was a magician who then went on to become like a big debunker because I think he felt like there were too many of these kind of fake psychics out there taking advantage of people and
Yeah.
whatnot. So he went on this kind of crusade to kind of debunk them. And I've watched like a billion of his videos over the course of my life. Like, so when I saw the magician here, I was like, it just
Oh, that's
screamed out.
definitely.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, and so James Randi also had this thing where he would if he came across a psychic or a mentalist or whatever, like a trick he couldn't reproduce himself or couldn't figure out or whatever, he would give them like $1 million. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
where
So it's exactly the same. Yeah.
oh gosh, they've literally lifted it. Yeah, but the thing is, anyone that doesn't know
Yeah.
wouldn't have picked up on that. And there are countless video clips. If you go on YouTube, you will find them, like where he's on a chat show in the 70s. So you have a 70s chat show host, like, I don't know, Johnny Carson or whoever. He'll have one of these kind of fraud psychics on, and they're trying to they're trying to mystify the audience and show them how great they are. But behind the scenes, they will bring James Randi out.
Right.
And
he'll debunk it.
And then suddenly the psychic or whatever can't do their trick in front of James Randi.
Yeah.
Because James Randi's a magician, so he's looking for all the thing.
Yeah.
So I think that the magician character in here, you know how the thing is, the magician. So the difference between James Randi and the magician character in here is, with James Randi, when he talks and when he says something, he is very. You can follow his reason and his train of thought and his logic and the way he. I don't remember him ever attacking a person's.
Yeah, this guy was
character or something.
horrible.
This guy was a bit of a twisted version of that James Randi type, where he just kept saying stuff like, "This is stagecraft," or "This is hocus pocus," or whatever. But he was never backing any of his claims with evidence. So that's where it kind of, I suppose the bit where he kind of did his trick in front of the whole stage and tricked the whole audience and whatnot was
But even
good.
that bit, but I was like, is that even possible? Can you hypnotize people to see that much? Because basically he tries to disprove the segment where they talk to the demon by everybody can be fooled by being hypnotized to thinking that they're seeing what they're seeing. And so he does it to the stage hat, the sidekick of the show, where he basically puts him into hypnosis and he thinks that he's got worms coming out of him, and you see these worms and he's like screaming and all this stuff. And everybody in the room is also seeing that. It's only when they look back at the tape that they realize that none of that actually happened. They were all just hypnotized. And I was like, I mean, I don't know if it's trying to be true to life, but I don't know if you could do that. Like make visual hallucinations from
like a big collective hallucination.
Yeah.
That bit, I felt like I've never witnessed one of those on TV or YouTube or anything, but that feels like they kind of went a bit outside of reality, like a bit kind of excessive with that, a bit over the top.
Because I do think when I was watching that bit, I knew it was not going to be real because of the fact that that isn't the climax. So like it can't have been real, otherwise there wouldn't have been anything else to come. That would have been the end of the show, because they are constrained to the fact that this would have had to, if this was a real TV show, 90% of it would have to be filmable, because they would just cut the cameras if something really bad happened. So they do, I understand that this film is constrained by the fact that they're doing a late night broadcast, because there is only a certain amount of things you can film. And so if he actually did rip his stomach open and there were worms coming out, they would have cut from that point, because that's too gory for TV. And I understand that by the end it's all gone terribly and there probably isn't anyone behind the camera at the end, so it's just kind of still filming. So I kind of do get that they can't do too much, but it just takes away from the horror aspect of it when you have to leave it right to the end.
I felt like that bit was a bit too much with the debunker. And the one character trait I wish the debunker had was, I wish there was a bit more humility with him, and he was genuinely eager to understand and try to, because maybe then he could have been like a semi-audience surrogate, like kind of, because we're probably trying to figure it out,
asking the questions.
But he was just a very dislikable character. I mean, didn't really good for him
and
or not.
also you kind of just want him to stop talking because you get his shtick. He doesn't believe
Yeah,
in it, but
he
it's like,
kept
okay,
interrupting and interrupting the
yeah.
flow of it and whatnot. And
And you just kind of want to say, move on. Do you know what? One character that I thought was going to be bigger and I thought was really interesting was the skeleton guy in the audience. There's this bit at the beginning where Jack Delroy is doing audience participation and he jokes about, because they're all the audience are wearing Halloween costumes, and he jokes about this one guy wearing a full skeleton costume. He's got his face covered. And this guy doesn't laugh, he doesn't make any gestures, he just sits there and, you know, he makes a little joke and walks off. And I thought that was pretty creepy. It was clear that that guy is weird and that something's going on with him because he's got his face covered. It turns out that he's part of the cult because he ends up like in the dream, whatever it is at the end. He kind of he's part of it.
I didn't
so
realize that now.
So you know the scene when after everything happens, there's that montage of him being in his old scenes. He's like, this isn't real. And he's basically like a dreamscape. Yeah. There's one where he is probably recreating what happened in the cult. We had to drink through a goblet and there were loads of people surrounding him. One of those people was the skeleton guy in the same costume.
Oh, I didn't even, now you mention it, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, but so it must have been like
foreshadowing.
But I thought, what would have been cool is if that person took his mask off and either was a person who could call out Jack and say, I know what you did, or something like that, or takes his mask off and it's like some weird ghosty demon thing. I don't know, something.
Yeah. It's just, what's the motive of going for Jack? What did he do that was so wrong? Like, why do they want to screw him over? Why did they want to kill everyone on his show? Like, why did they want to frame him for murder or whatever? Like, what was that just wasn't clear to me. Like,
so usually when you watch a horror film and exactly that happens, where let's say there's a demon that's inhabiting a house and it wants you to get out of the house and then it does things to get you out of the house, that's the motive. Or, you know, that it's revenge for something.
That I get.
In this, I didn't see what the connection was between the demon that was inhabiting that girl and Jack. So, okay, Jack might have sacrificed his wife unknowingly for his fame, but what's that got to do with the devil that's inside this girl? Why does that devil hate him? It's like a weird connection between them.
I think I mean, the more I think about it, I just wonder what if that devil was his wife coming back. That's the only thing that makes sense to me, that she's coming back to get some kind of revenge on him. But then that kind of leaves the plot hole open of why would she want to get, like... Yeah. Oh, I don't know. There's just... Yeah. It kind of all makes sense and doesn't at the same time. So I
think they took too long focusing on the idea of the film and how cool the premise was and didn't really think about what the narrative was going to end up as, and kind of just did it all at the end. I think that I don't even know how to explain it, but the demon inside this girl ends up using the electricity from around the studio to, I guess, I don't know if it was like charge itself or make itself more powerful, but it basically got this electric jolt and her head splits open and it creates this kind of cool, weird looking electric person thing and ends up killing everybody. And she's there with her head split open, and it's not gory, it's like you have to see it for me to explain. It's really hard to explain. Why did they do that?
I don't know. I part of me just feels like they kind of gave up at that point. But, I mean, there are movies like this where they kind of just go crazy and wild at the end. Like, this isn't unusual or anything, but I just felt like they kind of moved away from horror into this kind of supernatural science fiction-y type thing,
and kind of blockbustery in a way. Like, very... It didn't feel... I think what I was upset by was that right at the beginning, when I was thinking about the creepypasta roots, I thought it was going to be a real horror fans horror, something that we could stick our teeth into and go, this stuck with me, it, you know, messed with my mind or whatever, what the things that horror fans like. And it ended up just being quite a commercial horror film that did basically everything that you'd think it does, even though it had quite a unique story. And that's so frustrating because all the elements were there, it just stopped doing it through most of the way through.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, like, there were bits in this movie I was genuinely scared, but not scared, but just like, I'd say scared, and just they built the tension so well.
It was the anticipation of it,
yeah, and especially when they brought that young girl on, and she's like just creepy, staring down the camera.
Yeah, very happy, but no light behind her eyes. Yeah,
and then the bit which got me was like when David Dalmatian's like, like, oh, oh, thank you for joining us today. And then the girl looks back at him and goes to him, thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
And it's
that's
kind of
really
like,
cool. Yeah.
yeah, so there was like, and the whole Mr. Wriggles thing, and like up until where things got crazy towards the end, I genuinely had no idea what was going to happen in
Yeah.
this movie. Like, I did
Yeah.
not know which way they were going, and I think they did a lot of things right, but I think they lost me when it went a bit supernatural. And
I agree. And even if they had connected a little bit more with what was going to happen at the end, so they could have easily had sparks of electricity throughout. And so that you knew there was something building up with the electricity, like, because it just randomly, there's just this bolt of electricity that goes around the room and goes into this girl. And it's just
it
a
was
bit
just a bit weird. Yeah.
random. And if it had been, when you watch it again, you'll see that like there's electricity that's like, getting closer and closer to her or something like that would have been cooler. Just trying to make it a bit more consistent throughout so that the ending would make more sense. And
Yeah.
I kind of applaud them so once basically all of the people die, Jack Delroy has this dreamscape nightmare thing where he is reenacting some of his scenes of his talk show. And then all of the stuff that we've just spoken about, the culty bit, happens in one of those scenes where he ends up drinking out of this goblet and goes into his wife's hospital room. And it's all on the stage. So it's all almost part of the production, which is quite cool. And I think he kind of realizes that that's why she's dying, and she asks him to kill her and he kills her. But it feels like that none of that actually was needed. If they had added stuff into the whole rest of the film, little mentions of the wife, little mentions about how she died, maybe flashes or something, they didn't have to do all of that at the end, and it would have
No, it was
been more
entirely
consistent.
unnecessarily, really. Yeah, because I think, as I said earlier, like something about revealing the truth about what really happened between him and his wife would have been a bit more interesting, and maybe the whole thing, maybe it could have just been leading up to some kind of public humiliation of him in front of a live studio audience, because the fact is it's live TV, so I think, yeah, I just felt like they were because he started off as a likable character to me, and throughout the bulk of the film he was a fairly
He
likable
was.
character until, like, I think when he started getting a bit greedy
Yeah, because
for
he
the
realized
ratings and
how
stuff.
well the show was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he was putting that girl at risk and whatnot, and
Yeah.
that's when I started, like, by that point I didn't really have much sympathy for him,
Yeah.
and especially when his sidekicks, like, when he's like,
I don't feel comfortable with this.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he says, you're not a bad person, you can stop this.
Yeah.
And
And he just
yeah,
brushes them off. I thought what would have been really cool is if it ends up so Jack Delroy is basically a character for late night TV, and he is very charismatic. He's at the beginning, you kind of, as you say, you like him.
yeah.
What would have been really cool if it ends up that he is the bad guy, or like he is a serial killer, or he has and his mask drops at the end, and I thought he was going to be the one that would ruin it, not
Oh,
that
really?
they'd bring somebody else on and that he would end up killing everybody or something, and you would have gone, I never would have expected it to be him. He's Jack Delroy, he's the cool late night host. But
Yeah,
it wasn't that.
yeah.
I thought that would have been cool.
Yeah, because, like, yeah, as if he's so craving that famousness, he becomes infamous by doing. Maybe he
Yeah.
masterminded like this kind of grand finale to his show,
Yeah.
which it was all going to go up in
Yeah.
fireworks or something. Yeah.
But what I will say is this isn't a boring film. I was
No, no,
very
no.
entertained by it. And
Me
it is, again, I think we do this a lot where we kind of rip into a film and then we're like, but I kind of might have recommended it for somebody
Yeah.
that wants something that's like a little bit different. And I don't know, I probably would recommend it. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence. I would probably start the conversation by saying, don't get your hopes up, but just watch it for what it is. But just enjoy it for its uniqueness and just don't really think about the ending.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm still glad I watched the movie, and I did have a good, other than the ending, I had a good time with it. There's a part of me that thinks maybe I just need to give this a second viewing, and it probably all makes sense and fall into place. I'm hoping, at least. But I would recommend this. But I would just tell the person watching it, don't watch no trailer, don't read up on it, nothing, just go in blind.
Yeah.
And there's this thing I watched when I was a kid, and I think there's a few bits online which make reference to this or make the connection between this. But when I was a kid, the BBC did this thing called Ghost Watch, which was like, it came on at, like, I don't know, 9 o'clock or something, and it's like a mockumentary which starred a lot of kind of well-known BBC kind of celebrities at the
Right.
time. So like, but not just any celebrities, but like TV show hosts.
Ah.
So, and what they were doing was they were kind of like it was like this kind of, the premise was, oh hey, welcome to the BBC, this is Ghost Watch today, on tonight's show we're going to go to this house in London that's haunted. And it was just a play on that Enfield haunting. But it was like, this one was entire this was manufactured. But yeah, so they go into the house, and the whole thing is shown like a one continuous live kind of event. So there was like in the studio, where Michael Parkinson and I can't remember who else was, it was in the studio, and then you got the other kind of TV celebrities on location. One's outside the house, one's in the house, and it's just it's all done so convincingly. But then as the episode goes, stuff starts to go wrong, and I watched this when I was like 6 or 7 or something, like when it was on TV.
So it must have been actually scary at the time.
Freaking terrifying. And it was so this was a BBC show. It received like a record number of complaints because people thought it was real.
Wow.
This was a big deal. I mean, obviously by the end of it, the thing is with the BBC version is, even when you get right to the end, you still
don't know.
Wonder, like, I mean, obviously they make it very clear that's a movie, like it was like a TV special, by the time, but it's just shot so convincingly. And I just wish maybe this was a bit more like that, where maybe they can, like, so with the BBC version, they don't suddenly get supernatural that I can remember. Like, it doesn't go all kind of like, someone's head explodes. It doesn't, it's all still very grounded.
Yeah, so you could believe it.
Yeah. Because they're just like this, it's all these girls living in a house with their mother, and you're just, someone's in the basement, and they're just following where the noises are in the house, and it's just, and I'm getting like my hair, tingles just thinking about it. But I think this one definitely kind of veers more into Hollywood territory at the end there, where it didn't need to.
Oh, massively. And that really reminds me, there's an Inside Number 9 episode, which I'm guessing have you ever seen Inside Number 9?
No, I've never heard
of it. Watch it on iPlayer. It is incredible. It's done by these two guys, and every episode is a completely different premise. They're all different. They're all slightly creepy, or there's something weird that happens. I would recommend this to anybody who hasn't seen it.
Is it like Black Mirror or something? Or
it's like Black Mirror, but less about the digital age and more. So, for example, there's one which must be paying homage to that show, which is exactly what you've described, but then it actually becomes supernatural. So they're filming this fake TV show where they have celebrities go in, and it's filmed as if it's real, and they do these kind of things that make it supernatural, but then things actually start being supernatural, and it's really, really good, that episode. They're all different. So it reminds me of that, because that would have been a cool thing to do on this show as well, is if the Halloween special was that they were bringing on people, but we knew that they were all fake, and it was a bit naff, but then things really start happening, and you think, oh, and Jack doesn't know what's going on, no one in the audience knows what's going on, and then it suddenly everybody starts realizing that actually this is real, and then the demon comes out or whatever. That would have been cool. But,
yeah. Oh dear. Yeah, I think much like the visuals and the sound of this movie, where I felt like they kind of had the key concepts there, but they just kind of stopped short of making it really authentic. I felt like they're kind of like, I feel like the story is a bit like that as well, where it's like they were doing so well, and then right at the end it just felt like they either gave up, or I don't know, one of the brothers decided decided they wanted to get all artistic with it or whatever.
Yeah, a good analogy is that as Jack Delroy's trying to become the #1 talk show and he keeps missing the mark, this film also didn't get #1 spot because it missed the mark.